Morning, you lot. It's Monday. I'm recording this on the Monday morning. Quite a bit to talk about in there from the weekend. Let's get a few of the minor stuff out of the way first before we go on to what was undoubtedly the main event on the card and the main event of the weekend. The main event for all of us boxing fans at the weekend. Let's get into some other stuff first. Ben Whittaker. Let's talk about Ben Whittaker. I said in the video a while ago that Ben Whittaker's style is only going to take him so far. And in his last two fights that have been at mediocre level, really, to say the least, when you take away all the gimmicks, the movements, the clowning around, the acting, the pantomime, he's distinctly average, isn't he? He doesn't really seem to have anything special at all, and he was getting lit up a bit in that fight. There's nothing to me about Ben Whittaker that says this is a future elite star. Anything but. In short, I think you can say that Ben Whittaker's been found out, exposed. This is one sport above any other that at some point, if you ain't the real deal, you're going to get found out. You're going to get found out pretty quickly. And for me, on the last two performances, Ben Whittaker has been found out. Whether he, a lot of people saying sort of he used the excuse of that rather strange both going over the ropes. There were talk of the ropes being too loose. I don't know if it was this fight as well, but certainly for the majority of the fights out in Saudi, Mike Goodall and Ringcraft have been doing the rings, so you'd expect them to be of the highest quality. Anyone who knows Mike Goodall's been doing this stuff for as far back as I can remember. Regardless, I didn't really look at the replays of what happened and try and look and see if there had been any major damage to the ankle. Certainly, if he's rolled an ankle, any one of you boys out there that play football at any level, you'll have no doubt rolled an ankle at some point. Which is an injury that lasts a long fucking time. It's very, very painful. You certainly wouldn't be boxing on for the rest of the fight on it. I think I've rolled ankles 3 or 4 times. I've never been in a wheelchair. I've always been able to walk off the pitch or walk away with it. But regardless, who knows what he done. Point is, Ben Whittaker, the star he's built up to be, the talent he's built up to be, on the last two performances, no. Quite frankly, no. So, unless he makes dramatic improvement, not for me. Not for me. That's not a slight against him. A lot of people dislike Ben Whittaker because of the antics and all that. To me, it doesn't bother me. Washes over me. Don't dislike it. Don't like it. Don't really pay any attention to it. I don't care. The one drawback, if you're going to act like that, is when you lose and you show that much kind of, and a lot of people perceive it as arrogance, you're going to look a right fucking tit when you get chinned and floored, or you have a performance like this, or the last two performances. So, that's the Ben Whittaker stuff out of the way. Moving on to Fabio Wardley, who had a violent finish to end Fraser Clarke. Best wishes to Fraser Clarke. We hear it's a broken jaw. Again, I can speak from experience. Fraser's not going to be enjoying a nice steak for quite a long while, because you ain't chewing nothing for a good period of time with a broken jaw. Liquids only, I'm afraid, for Fraser from now on for a little while. But we wish him well. I hope Fraser all the best. By all accounts, Fraser's a lovely fella, and we wish him well. Fabio Wardley. You guys know, if you follow my channel for a long time, I've always been a big Fabio Wardley fan. Like I said before, he's from my area of the country. I like Fabio. I like him as a guy. He's a cheeky chappy. He's a very, very violent individual. Somewhere tucked down in Fabio, not very deeply, is one savage individual. And as with most savage individuals, there's also a very lovely side to them as well. They're at both ends of the spectrum. but Fabio is one nasty bastard inside that ring, and it's one of the attractions of Fabio. It's what makes him exciting. After the first fight with Frazer Clarke, I made a video and I said, if he doesn't sort out a defense, if he doesn't sort out a way to defend himself against incoming shots, he'll have a problem. As the levels go up, he's going to end up losing. He's going to end up probably getting stopped, because you can't go as a heavyweight and just ship punches and rely on attitude, guile, a good chin. It's going to catch up with you. It's going to catch up with you. And it kind of caught up to him to an extent in the first fight with the amount of times he gets hit. Joe Joyce is a fine example. Joe Joyce traded on his ability to take punches for a long time. And for a long time before that, I said, he's an accident waiting to happen because of that. And the same still stands for Fabio. And the problem with this one-round blowout is we didn't get the chance to see if Fabio had improved in that area. We didn't get the chance to see if Fabio had worked defensively, had worked on his defensive skills, had sort of worked out ways to deal with punches coming at him. So we didn't get to see that. So in terms of Fabio, this is a great result, but in terms of Fabio's development, it hasn't done him any good, because he's not got chance to develop as a fighter through this one-punch knockout. And what can happen with punches is they can suffer from the puncher's curse. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it's a risk, because every time you get a puncher who has a run of stoppages, unless they're a consummate professional in the way that Beterbiev is, or Beterbiev, tomato, a lot of guys suffer from the puncher's curse. I mean, we can look at Subriel Mateus's loss. I forget his name. The Australian lad that beat him last, which was a fantastic performance. He suffered from it. Couldn't get a guy out of there. Applied his pressure, didn't work. The other guy was too smart. Boxed, moved, and Subriel Mateus was at a loss as to what to do. And this is essentially the puncher's curse when you rely on the knockout. I hope that doesn't happen to Fabio. Fantastically destructive and violent performance, and he can do that to anyone in the world. Make no mistake. If his punches land, Fabio can do that to anyone. The problem is when he steps up in levels and he gets guys who are not as easy to hit, he's going to struggle. You can liken the Fabio Wardley Frazer 2 performance. You can liken that very much to the Joshua Dubois performance. You had one guy turn up who was from the very first second warmed up, primed, ready for war. And you had another guy from the very first second who wasn't quite warmed up yet, wasn't quite ready for war yet, was probably going to take a few rounds to warm up and get his rhythm and get the feel for the fight. And it's a fatal mistake. Joshua suffered it, and Frazer suffered it. So, yeah, caught cold, caught by a devastatingly violent punch, and that's all she wrote. So congratulations to Fabio. As I said before, I'm a Fabio fan, so I was happy to see. But as much as we like the spectacular knockouts, it's never nice to see a fighter knocked out like that. So, like I said, best wishes to Frazer. Hope Frazer makes a full recovery and he's A-OK. Goes back to his family safe. I believe he had surgery in Saudi. So, yeah, best wishes to Frazer. Sorry, you have to bear with me. I was still suffering the effects of last week's cold, whatever it is. Right. So then we move on to the main event. Now, for me, I thought this was just an absolute joy, a masterclass. I haven't enjoyed watching a fight. You can argue it wasn't the most action-packed, war, which it wasn't. But if you look at it just from If you want to see two examples of this sport at the very, very highest level, you'll go a long way to find a better display than this. I was absolutely enthralled from start to finish. It was an absolute joy, is the only way I can describe it. There was not a second that I wasn't totally engrossed. Anyone out there who's into movies in any way, I'm a massive fan of Michael Mann movies. My favourite movie of all time is Heat. Michael Mann has a way of directing cinematography that even the most small, inconsequential scenes have weight and have drama, which means there's not a moment in a Michael Mann film where you are not totally engrossed because of the way he directs cinematography. It can be an absolutely meaningless scene, but it can look fantastic and dramatic. And this is what this fight was. Even when periods where you could describe that there was not a lot of action, which wasn't that often, there wasn't a second that wasn't dramatic. There wasn't a second that I wasn't on the edge of my seat. It was an absolutely just fascinating, enthralling depiction, display of the very best of technical boxing, and boxing at the very highest tier, absolute tier 1 stuff. So for me, absolutely one of my favourite fights. One of my favourite fights, I think, possibly in memory. Not because it was a classic war, not because it was an up and downer, but just because of the display of what you were seeing was absolutely phenomenal. In terms of how the fight played out, it played out very much as I said it would in my prediction video. It was very much a case of Bivol getting rounds, not so much stealing rounds, winning rounds on merit, but winning them with his footwork, his speed, his movement, and his boxing brain. And then it was a case of Beterbiev trying to catch up, set the traps, and trying to catch up with Bivol to the point where he could possibly overturn him, grind him down, and maybe force a stoppage. And that's kind of how it played out. Now, there's controversy in some quarters over the result, and I can understand why, but I want to go into why possibly it's been a little bit misunderstood and why possibly some of the judges scored it as the way they did. I made a video quite some time ago, and I can't remember what the fight was, but the video was, I talked about how myself and Joe Stunner had both scored a fight. Now, we had scored a fight differently, and I was explaining how within the parameters of scoring, two judges can score a fight correctly within the parameters, but score a fight differently because of the way boxing judging works. In essence, we both scored it correctly, but we both scored it differently. But we'd scored it correctly within the parameters in which you're allowed to score the fight. Now, on the night, I'm in a WhatsApp group. There's myself, Joe Stunner, and another friend of ours, Dean, who knows the sport. So we were sort of WhatsApping all the way through. I said at the time, I think before round 11 and round 12, if Beterbiev wins round 11, round 12, and especially round 12, we could have a draw, because we were all kind of in the belief that we were all leaning towards Bivol. Beterbiev had a massive 11th round, and I don't know what you guys were, but when we were after the final bell and before the scores got read out, my gut told me that it was either going to be a win for Bivol or a draw. And I would not have minded the draw because I felt it was a fight where I didn't want to see either fighter lose. I think neither fighter deserved to lose. I said before the fight with the prediction that on an objective level, I was picking Bivol on the fact that he would kind of outmaneuver. He would employ his tactics of not getting caught and evading Beterbiev's onslaught, and in doing so, he'd run out a points winner. On a personal level, I wanted to see Beterbiev win. I wanted to see Beterbiev win with a destructive performance, even if he smoked Bivol. Just on pure entertainment, that's what I would have liked to have seen. Objectively, I thought Bivol win. And on the night, I thought Bivol had nicked it. I wouldn't have been unhappy with a draw. And as it was, Beterbiev got it. But my gut, after the final bell, was telling me a Bivol win or a draw. As the scores were being read out, even the 116 card, I still felt it was going to Bivol. I thought that was a little wide, but I still thought it was going to Bivol. That's what my gut told me. Then we got the result, and Beterbiev got the win. Now we go down the whole route of the subjectivity. So, depending on what you like, in essence, is what we mean when we talk about subjectivity. There's room in scoring to score on what you like. And then we throw into stuff like ring generalship. That can be scored. Now, part of me thinks that some of these judges may have scored this fight in favour of Beterbiev because he was the one walking forward and applying pressure. And I'll get on to effective pressure and non-effective pressure in a minute, but I just want to address how I believe some of these judges, or two of these judges, may have scored this. Now, if you look at that fight and we say Beterbiev was walking forward, applying the pressure constantly, as Beterbiev does, it's what he does in every fight, then you might go with that. And you go with that because then you look at Bivol and you say, well, Bivol's on the back foot. Bivol's the one doing the moving and the evading. Okay? And then he was throwing his salvos, and his punches were the more eye-catching, they were the more accurate. Now, if you were a judge and you were scoring it on the fact that you thought Beterbiev's applying the pressure and pushing Bivol back, to me that's wrong, because to me there was never any intention from Bivol or Team Bivol in their preparation for this fight. Team Bivol were never going to approach this fight in a purely offensive manner with the aim in pushing Beterbiev backwards. Team Bivol, for me, were always going to approach this from the point of view of we're going to evade Beterbiev. We're going to drag him deep, and we're going to catch him with salvos when we feel it's safe to do so, and for the rest of the time we're going to use our better feet, our better movement, and possibly our better technical ability to evade Beterbiev. So if a judge was scoring this from the aspect of I'm scoring this to Beterbiev, I'm scoring these rounds for Beterbiev because he's forcing Bivol back, there's an element of truth to that, but Bivol was always going to be boxing that way, almost going backwards, never running. Now, don't make the mistake that Bivol was getting on his bike and running. These are two totally different things. If you know what you're looking at, there's a big difference between getting on your bike and running and boxing, being evasive on the back foot and also losing lateral movement and clever boxing. Bivol is a pure technician, and this is what he showed. He never ran. So I don't know if two of these judges were scoring this like Beterbiev is forcing Bivol backwards the whole fight, forcing, and I emphasise the point, forcing Bivol to be defensive, going backwards, using lateral movement, and only boxing in bursts. Yes, there's an element of that, but the larger reason for Bivol doing that is because that would have been Bivol's game plan from the start. And I don't know if that's where the judges may have got this subjectively, read it possibly slightly wrong, in my opinion. I've rewatched the fight today, and I must say, I think it was closer than I thought on watching it first time around. I'm certainly not screaming robbery with Beterbiev getting the decision. What Beterbiev does, now we can talk about, now this is where we talk about effective aggression and non-effective aggression. Now, there are a lot of people will say that Beterbiev coming forward, throwing a lot of punches, but hitting a lot of arms and gloves. Now, a lot of people will see that as non-effective aggression. and this is where you'll be wrong. What Beterbiev does, and Beterbiev, this is, I'm just gonna digress for a second. Myself and Joe Stone, we're also talking about Chris Eubank. Chris Eubank boxes like he's a puncher. He loads up on everything, and essentially he's not really a big puncher, even though he loads up on everything. And this is the difference between, and this is how strong and how powerful a puncher Beterbiev is. Beterbiev essentially throws arm shots a lot of the time. He essentially arm punches a lot of the time, and they're still powerful. That is, if that doesn't say how strong a puncher Beterbiev is, I don't know what does. If you can essentially throw arm punches and beat people down with arm punches, you carry a serious accumulative power. So, going back to the effective pressure thing, Beterbiev walks forward with high volume. He starts slow, but when he gets into his rhythm, he walks forward with high volume. And he throws a lot of shots, and they don't really have the intent of hitting the target or breaking the guard or going through the guard or going through the defense. But what you do when you walk forward with pressure, and I talked about in my pre-fight about how Beterbiev is a master at applying pressure at every minute of the fight, even when he's not throwing punches. But what he does is he'll throw high volume, and he'll throw high volume at arms and gloves, because when you're an opponent of Artur Beterbiev, you know the devastation of his power. So even when he's hitting arms and gloves, that's enough to put you in a defensive shell. In a defensive shell that is going to leave you offset or unset to answer back with your own punches. So when we talk about effective pressure, Beterbiev, even throwing shots at arms and gloves, is applying effective pressure. And it's effective because it's stopping his opponent. It's stemming the flow of his opponent's return, because his opponent knows that even those shots that are coming at volume, hitting arms and gloves, are leaving me in a vulnerable position. If I'm in the ring and Beterbiev is facing me and he's throwing shots at volume at my arms and gloves, I'm thinking, do I risk trying to counter these shots while he's throwing them in volume? Possibly not. It's going to make me much more picky in when I choose my moments to answer back with my own shots. And they're going to be on the rare occasions when Beterbiev isn't throwing. And this is why Bivol only threw shots back in salvos at very specially selected times. And I said that also in the build-up. Bivol only throws his offensive shots when he feels it's safe to do so, when his opponent is not set to really answer back. And this is why Bivol, like I said, threw his salvos in very quick bursts. There are 2 or 3 exchanges in the whole fight where they punched with each other. But for the most part, it was Beterbiev walking forward, applying that effective pressure, even though it was on arms and gloves of Bivol, because that throwing those shots on the arms and gloves of Bivol made Bivol even more selective in answering back, knowing that, do I take the risk and exchanging? So that's the difference between effective pressure and non-effective pressure. Anyone who looks at Beterbiev and says, well, he was hitting a lot of arms and gloves, that's not effective pressure, wrong. That is effective pressure. Effective being the key word. It's affecting the way your opponent goes about returning and answering what you're doing. So Beterbiev hitting arms and gloves is effective pressure. Make no mistake. I also said, when in the group chat, I said to the lads, I said to Joe and Dean, it's the first time I've ever seen Bivol look uncomfortable or not at ease or not in full control for a while to that extent. And there was 2 occasions I believe Bivol was hurt to the body. He noticeably reeled back. He opened the distance so he could gather himself. And all professionals hide being hurt very, 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 very well. And he done it very well. But there were 2 occasions where he was hurt to the body. Saying that, I believe there was an occasion where Bivol stung Beterbiev with, I think it was a right hand to the chin. So Beterbiev felt Bivol's punches, but Yeah. So all in all, on the night, I thought Bivol was a clearer winner. Watching it back, I possibly still edge towards Bivol, but look, it's so subjective. The stars mixed so well together. There were so many nuanced things that each guy was doing that made this really hard to judge. Throw in the fact that there were at least 3 or 4 rounds that could have been swing rounds. I'm not going to shout bad judging. I'm not going to shout conspiracy. I'm not going to shout robbery. I'm not outraged that Beterbiev got it at all. I leant towards Bivol on the night. Watching it back, I'm not so sure it was that clear. I certainly wouldn't have had a problem with a draw. In essence, I'm not enraged and upset with the result. I think it was a shame that either man had to win a fight that was that good. For me, let's just have the return. Give us number 2, and then give us number 3. Although, as a few people have pointed out, does Beterbiev have enough time left in his career for a trilogy? Who knows? Again, he certainly didn't look his age, did he? And although it's the first time Bivol has completed 12, he's done 12 before, he's in a 12-round stoppage before, but he completed the 12-round distance, no problem. But in short, wonderful, just wonderful. What we got as boxing fans was just an absolute treat. It was a privilege. That's probably the best word I can use to describe. Watching Bivol v Beterbiev as a boxing fan, a boxing purist, and for as a lot of you out there know what you're looking at. I know a lot of this audience is educated. That was a privilege, an absolute privilege. As always, I'd love to know what you guys think. Leave it in the comments. We can chat about this. I'm sure this won't be the last time we talk about this, but just enjoy these things. Enjoy these things while they're here. Enjoy these fighters while they're here. Enjoy these fights while they're being made. Thanks to Turkey, because would we have ever seen this? I'm not so sure. A privilege. Cheers, lads and lasses. I'll see you all soon.